Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Deuteronomy chapter 6 in a clear and simple way, step by step. I am just so thrilled you're joining us for this explainer because this specific chapter, it contains some of the absolute most famous, most powerful, and frankly most foundational words in the entire Hebrew Bible. We're going to walk right through the actual text, going strictly in order, verse by verse. And we'll be looking solely at the simple, direct meaning, what is known as the Peshat. We're going to break down exactly who is speaking, what they're saying, and why it matters so much without getting lost in any complicated symbols or deep mysticism. We are sticking strictly to the text, its historical context, and its direct message. Okay, let's look at our roadmap from Moses' crucial instructions. We're going to cover 1. Introduction and context. 2. The Shema and love. 3. Remembering God and prosperity. 4. Loyalty and doing right. 5. Teaching the next generation. And finally, 6. Life lessons and recap.
Section 1. Introduction and context. The promise.
To really understand what's happening as we look at these first 3 verses, you have to picture the scene. The Israelites have been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. An entire generation has passed away. And now, this new generation is standing right on the edge of the Jordan River, looking directly at the land of Canaan. Moses, their great leader, well, he isn't going to cross over with them. So he's delivering his final, absolutely most important speeches. He is giving them the ultimate survival guide for how to actually live and thrive in this new territory. And in verses 1, 2, and 3, Moses explains the why behind the rules. In verse 1, he establishes his absolute authority right out of the gate, saying, "Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land where you go over to possess it." Then in verse 2, he gives them the motivation, that you might fear the Lord your God to keep all his statutes and his commandments, that your days may be prolonged. So obedience is directly, practically linked to their survival and their longevity. Finally, in verse 3, he says, "Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as the Lord has promised you, in a land flowing with milk and honey." Now, in simple terms, this is just a beautiful poetic way of describing incredible agricultural abundance. Milk represents the livestock, while honey represents the sweetness from fruits like dates. Moses is basically telling them, God is handing you an absolute paradise, but your ability to stay there and actually enjoy it depends entirely on your obedience to these instructions.
Section 2. The Shema and love, covering verses 4 through 9.
If there's a beating heart to the book of Deuteronomy, and honestly to the entire biblical text, we are about to read it right now. Having just told the people that their entire future depends on following God's laws, Moses now boils all of those laws down to one single foundational principle in verse 4. This single sentence, the Shema, establishes the core truth of God's absolute oneness for the Israelites. In Hebrew, it's Shema Yisrael. And you know, Shema means so much more than just having sound waves hit your ears. It means to listen, to really pay attention, to internalize it, and to obey. Moses is commanding the attention of the entire nation. He is declaring this radical monotheism in a world that was completely surrounded by polytheism, cultures that worship dozens of different gods for the sun, the rain, the harvest. Moses just draws a line in the sand. The Lord our God, the Lord is one. There are absolutely no competing divine powers, just one.
To clearly grasp the Hebrew text here, it's really helpful to know that Lord refers to the sacred name YHWH, while God translates to Elohim, highlighting his absolute power. When you read this in English, you'll very often see the word Lord spelled out in all capital letters. That's simply the translation's way of showing you that the original Hebrew text uses the sacred, personal, 4-letter name of God, YHWH. It's the name that signifies God's eternal nature and his very special, unique covenant relationship with Israel. On the flip side, the word translated as God is Elohim, which is a title signifying ultimate strength, absolute power, and creation. By putting them together right here, Moses is making a profoundly important point. The all-powerful creator of the universe, Elohim, and the personal God who personally rescued you from Egypt, YHWH, are the exact same being, and he is completely undivided.
Verse 5 immediately follows that incredible declaration of God's oneness with the required human response. "And you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your might." So this belief, it isn't just some intellectual exercise. It requires total, all-encompassing devotion. Just look at the breakdown. With all your heart. Now, in the ancient world, the heart was considered the center of thought, logic, and decision-making, not just your feelings. With all your soul. This actually means your very life force, your breath, your absolute being. And with all your strength, or might. The Hebrew word used here, miodeka, can also mean your resources, your wealth, your physical energy. Moses is explicitly saying that your relationship with this one God demands absolutely everything you have and everything you are.
Now Moses knows that humans are incredibly forgetful, right? So in verses 6 through 9, he provides these highly practical, step-by-step instructions to actually keep this love alive. Verse 6 starts by saying, "And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart." Because let's face it, you can't pass on what you don't possess yourself. Then verse 7 says, "And you shall teach them diligently to your children." The original Hebrew word for teach here actually implies sharpening or repeating. And how do you do that? You do it by talking about them when sitting in your house, when walking by the way, when lying down, and when rising up. He even tells them to make it a physical reality in verse 8. "Bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes." This literal instruction is the actual basis for tefillin, those small leather boxes containing scriptural verses that are worn during prayer. Finally, verse 9 says, "Write them upon the doorposts of your house and on your gates," which, as you might guess, is the basis for the mezuzah. The idea here is simple but incredibly profound. Your physical environment and your daily routine must be totally, completely saturated with the reality of God's Word.
Section 3. Remembering God in Prosperity, covering verses 10 through 15. Having firmly established the commands, the narrative tension totally shifts here. Moses acts as a brilliant psychologist. He understands human nature perfectly. He knows that right now, while they're camping out in the desert and depending entirely on God for their daily manna and water, it's pretty easy to rely on Him. But what happens when the struggle ends? Listen to how he describes the land they are about to enter in verses 10 and 11. He says, "God is going to give you great and goodly cities which you did not build, houses full of all good things which you did not fill, cisterns already hewn out of the rock that you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees that you did not plant." The Israelites are essentially being handed the keys to a fully functioning, prosperous civilization. They are going from being oppressed slaves making bricks in the mud of Egypt to inheriting immense, completely unearned wealth. And Moses pinpoints exactly where the danger lies at the very end of verse 11. "And you shall eat and be satisfied." That right there is the moment of greatest spiritual peril. Because when your stomach is full and your house is warm, it is incredibly easy to just pat yourself on the back, think you did it all yourself, and completely forget the God who saved you in the first place. So in verse 12, Moses explicitly says, "Beware lest you forget the Lord who brought you forth out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage." He tells them in verse 13 to fear the Lord, serve Him, and swear by His name. Then verses 14 and 15 issue a very stern prohibition. "You shall not go after other gods, of the gods of the peoples that are round about you." And why? Because the Lord is a jealous God in the midst of you. Now in the biblical text, this is the jealousy of a covenant, very much like a marriage. God has bound Himself exclusively to Israel, and He demands exclusive loyalty in return. If they betray Him, verse 15 warns that the anger of the Lord will be kindled and will absolutely destroy them from off the face of the earth.
Section 4. Loyalty and Doing Right, covering verses 16 through 19.
Moses now details exactly what that loyalty looks like in action. Having given them the warning about what not to do, don't forget, don't worship other gods, he transitions to a historical reminder of how they failed in the past, so they don't repeat those same mistakes today. In verse 16, he says, "You shall not test the Lord your God, as you tested Him at Massah." So what is Massah? Well, it's a specific location in their history, from earlier in their desert wanderings. The name literally translates to testing. At that place, the people were thirsty, and instead of just asking God for water with a sense of trust, they quarreled, they complained, and they essentially demanded that God prove Himself on the spot, asking, "Is the Lord among us or not?" Moses brings this up to make a crucial point. Loyalty means trusting God's character and His promises without demanding that He constantly perform miracles just to prove His presence. He's saying, you already have the evidence of Egypt. You don't need to test Him anymore. Instead of testing God, Moses provides the clear alternative in verse 17. "You shall diligently keep the commandments of the Lord your God, and His testimonies and His statutes." And verse 18 really sums it up beautifully. "And you shall do that which is right and good in the sight of the Lord." Notice the conditional promise baked in here. If they do what is right and good, two major things are going to happen. First, it will go well with them, and they will go in and possess the good land sworn to their fathers. Second, as verse 19 states, God will thrust out all their enemies before them. So the military success and the overall societal prosperity of the Israelites are directly, undeniably tied to their moral and religious obedience.
Section 5. Teaching the Next Generation, covering verses 20 through 25.
Moses knows that this initial generation might hold on to these commands because, well, they actually lived through the harshness of the desert. But what about their children? What about the kids who were born in those comfortable houses with full stomachs, who never actually saw the parting of the Red Sea or the miracles in Egypt? How in the world do you keep the covenant alive then? Moses is incredibly forward-thinking here. In verse 20, he pictures a scene in the future. A son looks at his parents. Maybe he sees them binding the words on their hands, or strictly resting on the Sabbath, or refusing to worship the popular local idols. And he asks a very smart, completely natural question. What is the meaning of the testimonies and the statutes and the ordinances which the Lord our God has commanded you? Now, Moses doesn't say, tell your son to just be quiet and do what he's told. No way. The biblical tradition is deeply educational. Questions from the youth are fully expected and highly encouraged.
So in verses 21 through 25, Moses provides the exact step-by-step script the parents are to use, and honestly, it is an absolute masterpiece of storytelling. First, in verse 21, you give them the history. We were Pharaoh's slaves in Egypt. You start right there with the vulnerability. Then verse 22 tells of the rescue, and the Lord showed signs and wonders great and grievous upon Egypt. Verse 23 seamlessly connects the past to the present. And he brought us out from there that he might bring us in to give us the land. And finally, verses 24 and 25 explain the true purpose of the law. And the Lord commanded us to do all these statutes, for our good always, that he might preserve us alive. Moses desperately wants the child to understand that these laws aren't just some heavy burden. They are a gift from a loving rescuer, specifically designed to guarantee their survival. The chapter concludes with verse 25 stating that keeping the law will be their righteousness, their tzedakah, before the Lord.
Section 6. Life Lessons and Recap. Now that we've walked through the text chronologically and covered the plain, direct meaning of Deuteronomy chapter 6, let's distill this down into some really practical life lessons. We've seen Moses standing on the edge of the Promised Land, urgently trying to equip his people not with weapons, but with words, with laws, and with a shared history. Let's look at the key takeaways we can draw from this incredible text today. First, we see that believing in one God isn't just a passive activity. It requires the total devotion of our mind, our life force, and our physical resources. It demands absolutely all of our energy. Second, humans are forgetful creatures, right? We need physical, environmental reminders, talking about our values constantly at home and on the road, just to keep them front and center in our daily lives. Third, we learned a really deep psychological truth here. Hardship often brings us closer to God, while prosperity and comfort can incredibly easily make us arrogant and forgetful. We absolutely must practice active gratitude, especially for the blessings we enjoy but did not build ourselves. And finally, a culture only survives if it successfully answers the questions of its children. We must purposefully share our history, explaining not just the rules, but the great overarching story of rescue and purpose behind those rules. This text leaves us with a powerful challenge about exactly how we live our daily lives and how we pass our values forward. Think about how you can integrate these profound concepts of devotion, memory, and teaching into your own daily routine. Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.